I'm Eloy Ortiz Oakley, President and CEO of College Futures Foundation, and you're invited to Opportunity Forum with College Futures. Hi, this is Eloy Ortiz Oakley, President and CEO of College Futures Foundation. I'm here today with Dr. Michael Drake, the 21st president of the University of California, and now approaching his fourth year in the role. Time flies. President Drake, thank you for taking the time to be with us, and welcome to Opportunity Forum with College Futures.
President Ortiz Oakley, nice to see you and glad to be here.
Well, all right. So we're beginning a series of conversations with the leaders of the three public higher education systems, and us here at College Futures, we know how important it is for learners of all backgrounds to have the opportunities necessary to gain a foothold in the California dream and to have the opportunity to have a meaningful place in the California economy. And so our three systems are critically important to the fruition of that vision. So we begin this conversation with President Drake, and I'd like to take a personal point of privilege and just say that it was a pleasure working with him while I was on the Board of Regents. It was a pleasure being his colleague when I was Chancellor of the California Community Colleges. And most importantly, he's one of the former chancellors of my alma mater, UC Irvine, probably his most important role. So, President Drake, let me ask you, let's jump into a couple of questions. First of all, you've been in higher education a few years. This has been a lifelong journey for you. Where did this journey begin? What was one of your first experiences or first jobs in higher education? And what has led you to this role as president of the University of California?
Well, thanks very much. You know, I think I go back and say that for a quarter of a century or so, I had parents who were focused on education, and we knew of it as an important thing. And so I was kind of aimed toward a career in which I myself would be educated. That was never something that I was allowed to think differently about. And that helped a lot. So I'd say that, and so many of my colleagues, I think, and many of us say that really the support at home was very, very important, and that's a true thing. And I was a product of California public schools through high school. I went to community college in Sacramento and then transferred there to go to college. And education was important to me throughout all of that. I enjoyed the learning part of it. It was fun. And then I also dabbled a bit in teaching, and the teaching was volunteer teaching. And then I kept that going through my medical school and residency training, where we're teaching as a part of kind of your normal work. But that then kind of merged seamlessly into my joining the faculty at UCSF. So I finished residency at UCSF on a Friday, and I joined the faculty on a Monday, and had responsibilities with my really friends, family, colleagues I've been working with for years, just sort of changing my role a bit. And so I went from being chief resident Friday to being Senate chief on Monday. And, that was a very seamless role moving forward.
So you've now been in and around the University of California for some time. You have a unique perspective. You've been faculty, you've been trained as a medical doctor. You have seen the research side of the university, and you've also served as a leader on campus, a leader in the office of the president, as well as you've had a chance to lead a university outside of California. I think that university, it's called the Ohio State University or something like that.
That's what, yes, cool.
But tell us about, given all that experience, tell us about your vision for the University of California. And in your mind, when does the system look its best? And then what are some of the current challenges that you see that may get in the way of the university being at its best?
Well, great question. So I mentioned that I sort of finished my residency and then began a career of teaching and research right away, while I continued and grew in patient care. I loved being a faculty member at the University of California. In fact, I would say every day at the University of California seemed like a real privilege to me. So it was a privilege to be able to be a medical student at UCSF. I was, very grateful for that opportunity. I loved being a resident. I felt that it was a real opportunity. And then I was flattered and honored to be a faculty member. And that was the pathway that I began on. And then the work really was, we call it ladder rank faculty, and it felt a lot like climbing a ladder. It was like rung after rung, trying to do a little bit more, doing research, doing teaching, contributing to the enterprise. And the career kind of just grew around that, a little more responsibility one year than the year before. And as we kept on moving forward. Throughout all of it, a couple of things seemed true to me. One is that the University of California is a really outstanding institution. That was my, it's what I sought when I came, it's what I experienced. And then I felt that it was what I was a part of as we were growing. And as an outstanding institution, I think my colleagues felt that it was our responsibility to continue to advance the pinnacle of quality in the world that we were engaged in. When I was focused on being an ophthalmologist and focused on eye disease, I would say that as we sat around in the faculty rooms or worked in the clinics and wards or were doing teaching, it was our concept that we had to be the best in the world. And that we looked at whoever we thought the best in the world was, and then that's who we competed against. That concept of doing the best we can to be the best we can has been the case even as I've become more involved in the administrative side of things. And it really is ubiquitous throughout our institution. And there are a couple of things we have to do while doing that. We have to be outstanding. We have to be terrific. We have to contribute to society. But we also have to show the way on things like creating a real avenue for students whose families and background might have meant that this wasn't something that seemed possible as they were coming forward. I mentioned that along with many of us, I was a transfer student, so I started and there was a pathway there, but you had to work to get to it. And I was appreciative that there was a door, but I knew the door led to a pathway, and the pathway required work. We want to make sure that we have access broadly available and understood to people throughout California. We want to be affordable for people throughout the state of California, and we want the excellence that I said has drawn so many people to us to be there, so that if we look at access, affordability, and excellence, and have those really modify everything that we do, that lets us continue to move forward and be the best university, the best community partner we can be.
So one of the challenges that certainly I've experienced in my career here in California is the challenge of creating access opportunities for Californians of all backgrounds. I was recently at a UC Irvine meeting, and Chancellor Gilman mentioned that UC Irvine had once again broken a record in the number of applications for seats in the freshman class at UC Irvine. I think it was north of 140,000. And that's certainly been true of places like UCLA, San Diego, and others. So within the context of that increasing demand for seats in the University of California, I know the regents of the University of California have been talking about this and formed a working group. And I know working with the leadership at UC Office of the President to come up with a plan to think about how the university expands access. How do you see that plan rolling out, and what are some of your thoughts about how the University of California can continue to expand access to Californians of various backgrounds?
Well, very important. I appreciate hearing the update. So when I began, we were in the 45-ish thousand applicants, and excited about that. We were among the nation's leaders. When I left, it was 9 years, and we were around 80,000. So we had, come nearly doubled that in those years. That was 9 years ago, and now it's roughly doubled again. So that's sort of Moore's law. So we're excited to see that, because we want to create something that people see as desirable and good. Great. By the same token, there are not 140,000 seats
Right.
at UC Irvine, and we as a system want to do everything we can to, as we create interest, we want to create opportunity. So we have a plan to grow the enrollment at the university by something north of 23,000 students over this decade. And for perspective, that's a camp that will be about the size of, say, the Santa Cruz campus. We want to add the number of students that we have that would be similar to starting a new campus like Santa Cruz, but we want to do that without actually having a new campus. A new campus is, when we've done that, it's been terrific, but you've worked with us for these last many years and seen with Merced, we've done wonderfully. It's been billions of dollars in 25 years, and we're at about 10,000 students. Well, we want to add twice that number of students in half the time. And so we're doing that by having all the campuses lean in to increase their capacity and the numbers of students that we enroll. And the way that we do that, since we're not going to be doing this by bricks and mortar and building new campuses, yes, there will be construction and increasing in size and buildings, and particularly at Riverside and Merced, I think we're going to see that type of traditional growth. But what we want to do is to help students graduate in a timely fashion. So we want to have their full 4 years with us, but be able to graduate in a timely fashion. So as we shorten time to degree, we have fewer students that need 5 or 6 years to graduate, so that we can take more first and second year students and kind of increase the number of people that we have there. So we want to make sure that we increase the capacity that way. We want to use online to help enhance capacity. We want to use partnerships with others, and some of those partnerships will be with other institutions. Some will be with the other parts of our segmental family, with our CSU and CC, California Community College siblings, and then others will be with things like study abroad. So increase our capacity, increase the efficiency of the opportunity that students have with us, and create more opportunity for more California students over this next decade. And we're excited about that. Well on our way and meeting our targets to date. So we're excited about that.
That sounds wonderful. Now, as you think about expanding access, there's also a group of students that's certainly near and dear to my heart and important to College Futures, which are transfer students. And I know UC has been doing a lot of work, taking a hard look at who comes to UC and what numbers from which campuses. And I know you've identified that you want to expand the number of community colleges that you're receiving transfer students from. What are your thoughts about transfer students, and how do they fit into your plans for expanding access?
Well, as a transfer student myself, I think it's a great pathway. About 30% of our students are, and you know this, I know well, about 30% of our students are transfer students, and this is much higher than our competitor institutions across the country. It's really an important part of our pathway that we're very proud to show. The way I mentioned earlier, we want the type of program that others seek to emulate. So about 30% of our students are transfer students, undergraduate students are transfer students now. We, as you know, have a 2-to-1 ratio of for every 2 freshman students we accept a transfer student. Some of our campuses actually are higher than that. UCLA, I think this last year was 1.6 first-year students for every transfer student. So that was terrific. Within this, we know that certain community colleges have more successful articulation relationships and history with certain of our campuses. They, not surprisingly, tend to be ones that are close to the campus, and that's great, and we appreciate that. We'd like very much to be able to have relationships with community college campuses that are further away from the places where our campuses are, so that we can make sure that when we say access, affordability, and excellence, we mean access broadly from throughout California. And as you know, we have programs to reach more into particularly the Central Valley and Inland Empire to try to make sure that the pathway to transfer is available to students no matter what their geographic origin. And then we are very interested in, we track this very carefully, and actually a new project that we just began, looking to do all that we can to make sure that transfer students are successful once they arrive with us.
So you hit on student success, and I know in your time in the University of California, your time in higher education, I think one of the things that we've seen impact student success more and more today is the issue of student mental health. And I know there's been lots of reports, lots of research done that shows the top areas of distress for students. I mean, everything from family concern to finances to reported mental health concerns, academic concerns. How is the UC thinking about supporting, holistically supporting student success? And how do you think about how we support students in their mental health concerns?
Student mental health is a big issue for all of higher education. And one of the things that's happened over the last generation is that more students are arriving on our campuses who have a history of a mental health challenge of one type or another. So we have a great number of students who arrive to us who are already been in sometimes in care, sometimes for years.
Mm-hmm.
And we have to, as they now come and move from home to live with us, live on our campuses routinely, we have to pick up that opportunity, that obligation to care for them. And so we have dramatically expanded our counseling services and other things that we have on campus to try to be able to work with our student population in ways that facilitate their ubiquitous success. What we know is that we can't, the faster we have to chase, it seems,
Mm-hmm.
and we're not going to get to the end of this by one-on-one therapy, psychoanalysis, medication, etc. The need is just too great, and it's not
Right.
specific to us. It's just broad to society. So we're thinking about lots of things that we can do to, one, de-stress the enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
and two, develop coping mechanisms as a part of the life experience of our colleges that will help groups of our students, our entire population, to move forward. So we have things, group support groups and others who meet together to talk through the issues that are stressful. We work with faculty and others to try to do what we can to model assessment methodologies that are less stressful, knowing that things like one big final at the end of a course is more stressful than having more frequent lower stakes assessments, and it's not as effective in helping to guide students. So we're trying to continually campus by campus model those types of behaviors. We have apps that we are in fact looking at that are, so you can do your own wellness assessment. Mm-hmm. and then if the needle starts moving toward things that might need an intervention, the app helps point you to the type of intervention that we have on campus that ranges from, as I said, peer-led support groups to a warm line, to crisis intervention, to counselors, to psychiatric care, and that whole realm range. And so it's an ongoing, everyday challenge for us, but we know that it's a challenge for us on our campuses and in our society more broadly.
So you talked about de-stressing the operation, and certainly the cost of attending college or university is a stress for many students. And I know you've been thinking a lot about reducing the cost of attendance for students, and creating more predictability in the cost of attending during a student's experience at the University of California. So tell us about how UC is addressing the total cost of attendance, and how is the tuition cohort model going?
Now, about 61% of California undergraduates leave with no loans, no debt at graduation. So that's pretty good. I know at my prior institution, we were working really hard to get to 50%. And that was, my goal was to get to 50.0001%. So most students were leaving with no debt. I'd say we're really pleased that we're at 61% of California undergraduates who are leaving with no debt. 54% of our California undergraduates have their tuition fully covered, thanks to financial aid, so that's great. And the average debt, for those who do leave with debt, the average debt at graduation is about $18,000. The national average, is north of $30,000. So we feel we're starting from a good place. We are doing a couple things. You mentioned cohort tuition, the tuition stability plan, and that's a plan where your tuition is set when you're a first-year student, and then that's flat for 6 years. The following year's plan might be a little higher than yours. It's been a few $100s a year higher each year, but that plan is set for that person for their 6 years. That stability has been well received by families. And when we voted for having the ability to have a an inflation-adjusted change in tuition year by year. We also committed an unusually large fraction of that to financial aid. So fully 45% of that new tuition money goes to the need-based financial aid pool. And by doing that, we're adding 5,000-6,000 students per year to our debt-free pathway. We're able to decrease the amount of money that they need to supply on their own and able to have a debt-free pathway. So we added about 5,500 students the first year. Now in 2 years, that's about 12,000 students who we've added to the debt-free pathway. And the goal is to get to, by the end of the decade, again, to have it that virtually all of our students who arrive, either due to family, they happen to have families that are in the upper income bracket, or we're able to provide support so that they can see a pathway to leaving the university debt-free. But the job is to make it that we can get all the way to a debt-free pathway for all of our students, and pleased with the progress to date.
Well, that is great news. Great news for our learners, great news for access to the University of California, particularly for the kind of learners that College Futures is focused on. One of the other things that College Futures has been worried about is the importance of having leaders of color, both faculty and administrators on campuses, so that students can see themselves reflected on their campuses. You yourself, it's amazing that I even have to say this, but you yourself, you're one of the few major R1 university leaders of color. What is the UC doing to support diverse and equity-focused leaders, and what should we be doing more of?
The challenge, and you've had the same thing in your career, Eloy, without even asking, that step by step, whenever you arrive, you're by yourself, and I mentioned all those years ago joining the faculty myself, and there were on our entire faculty a handful of people of color then, and at each of my steps along the way, that's been the case. So people would have thought that my name was the first black, because I get introduced that way so often. Here's the first black, boom, but what being the first is whatever it is. What you don't want to be the case. You don't want to be the last. And
right.
What we've seen is that bit by bit, slowly, where there was one, there are now a half dozen, and a half dozen still is few, but it's a whole lot more than once. Our job is to diversify the faculty and diversify the graduate student cohort to train more people in careers that allow them to aspire to both teaching and being on our faculty, and also aspire to academic leadership in positions like yours. And we do our best, again, on a daily basis to try to recruit and support people. When we mention that we're going to grow by 23,000 students over this decade, we're planning on growing by 1,100 faculty. And our goal is to have 50% of those faculty be people of color, or faculty from backgrounds that are underrepresented broadly in higher education. Every year, I meet with every campus to hear their strategic plan and their budget plans for the following year. I have 4 questions I ask them. Every year, I ask them about their climate change and the progress they made on climate change. Every year, I ask them about their support of students from challenged backgrounds, such as students who are first generation, students who have been foster youth, students who are have disabilities, and students who've been carcerately impacted. But I also ask them about their faculty diversity every year. So those are things that are really important to us, and I'm pleased to see them making progress.
Well, that's certainly an area that we hope to continue to be supportive in creating the space to not only create more room for leaders of color, but also to support them along their journeys. Let me ask you a final question, and I appreciate all the time that you've taken to talk with me today.
Great.
You've laid out a vision, you've named priorities that you want to aim for. How can we in philanthropy partner with you to support you? What other things can other leaders in California do to support your efforts at the University of California?
I would say that the most important thing we'd like a couple of things to be shared widely. One, the more we can all share the message that we at the university want to be affordable and want to provide access broadly. We want people to apply and to aspire to the university. And as that is the case, we can help you to gain admission and to be successful. And then that's our goal. We are very interested. It always pains me to hear that people said, well, I had real aspirations, but I didn't want to apply because it was going to be too expensive, or something else like that. There was too much of a challenge. Let us work with you and see if we can form those bridges. And so I'd love people to know things like the fact, as we mentioned, that if you're a family in California making $80,000 a year or less, that there's no tuition. If you're a member of a federally recognized Native American tribe, we cover that tuition. We also have a middle class scholarship plan that then is for families that are over $80,000 a year. So just give us a chance to work with you. And honestly, in California, it's great. If there's the University of California, there's the California State University system, and there are California community colleges. And among the three of us, we can find a pathway for the vast majority of students who want to have higher education and want to have post-secondary education. And I just say, lean in, come to us, partner with us, and have us work together to create those pathways of success that are so important to our collective future.
Well, on that note, we do expect to partner with you. We are the California that we are because of the three systems of public higher education that we have. So I appreciate the leadership that you've brought to the university, President Drake, and I really do appreciate you taking the time to talk with us here at the Opportunity Forum at College Futures. So thanks for being with us.
It's been my privilege, President Ortiz Oakley. I look forward to seeing you soon, and I look forward to our years of working together.